We on? Hello, welcome to all our listeners and viewers around the world. I am not Bassam Haddad.
And my name is not MK Smith. I'm Kat Haseman. You may know me from the Graduate Student Corner segment.
And I'm Mohammad Abou-Ghazala. You might not recognize me because I'm usually putting this show together behind the scenes.
We're giving our esteemed co hosts a much needed break. Well, not really. Bassam is just right over there producing the show behind the scenes, and MK is off in Morocco learning Arabic. So you're stuck with us.
Welcome back. We've got a packed show today with panels on Lebanese media, Islamism, the Political Economy Summer Institute, a collaboration between Middle East and Latin American studies, the new issue of the Arab Studies Journal, a roundtable on the Gezi Uprising, and great conversations with Maria Bouzaid, Abdullah Al-Arian, Karim Rabi', Samir Aboud, Shayna Marshall, Omar Dahi, Amin Aqiq, and Owen Lawson.
And of course, our usual media segment with Adil Iskander. As always, you'll find all of the content discussed here in the episode today in our accompanying episode digest. Let's get started with a few announcements.
Keep your eyes peeled for a new JADMAG coming out soon. For those who don't know, JADMAG features exclusive content not found on Jadaliyya, and it is curated to function as a knowledge producer on the region.
Also coming out soon, a new edition of Status Al-Wada audio-visual podcast. We'll be announcing all the exciting content of Status Issue 8.2 on Jadaliyya and on our social media in the coming days. The collaborative year-long, 10 years on, mass protests and uprisings in the Arab world project has reached its halfway mark, 6 out of 12 months down. Time flies.
The 10 Years On project brings together 17 of our partners to produce resources for educators, researchers, students, and journalists to more critically understand the Arab uprisings and their various dimensions over the past decade.
One of this month's signature panels, titled Media Framing of Political Events in Lebanon, was moderated by Maria Bouzaid. The panel addressed how Lebanese media responded to the October 17 uprising and the August 4th Beirut port explosion, as well as how political agendas influence the media's coverage. We have Maria Bouzaid all the way from Lebanon to fill us in on the panel.
Maria, hi, how are you? She's muted.
1 second, Maria, you're
What?
muted. We're good.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Maria. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day. Really quick, could you tell our viewers about any key takeaways from the panel discussion?
This is very hard to start with the takeaways because the topic was very somehow complicated and complex. However, the main idea behind it and the main message was the agendas of Lebanese media and how the ownership of traditional media institutions are affecting somehow the coverage, especially of the uprising that happened last October. However, also with the distinguished speakers that we had during the talk, we were able to see how the alternative media are really providing the other discourse and the other narrative that is usually neglected by traditional media outlets that are directly owned by political parties and by Lebanese businessmen.
Thank you so much. That's a really concise answer. So, for some of the audience that would want, and we encourage to check out the panel and the digest, what sorts of insights could we look forward to finding there?
This is just like, let me also say that it was just an introduction to so many other events. The insights of this particular talk that we can somehow summarize to our audience today, we can say that we were able to see how the Lebanese context is so different, and we really need right now to talk about these important issues, why we need to talk about and how we need to talk about these important issues. It was a combination of an activist approach, an academic approach, and a professional approach. So that's why I invite all the speakers who were not able to watch our talk to watch it again on Jadaliya. It's available and all other platforms, and to be able to see how it was like an introduction to different perspectives. And hopefully we can have very soon also more somehow deeper and other also talks that will revolve around the same topics but from a different lens.
Thank you so much, Maria. We look forward to seeing all of that content and hopefully to have you back on to talk about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a good one.
The TYO project held another event this month, co-sponsored by Stanford University's Center on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law, and the ASI program in Islamic Studies. The event was titled Islamists and the Arab Uprisings.
Co-editor of Jadaliya's Critical Currents in Islam page, Abdullah Al-Arian, discussed how Islamism has been impacted by the experience of the Arab uprisings. I had the chance to speak with Abdullah yesterday. Let's check it out. Hello, everyone. I'm Mohammad Abou-Ghazala, and I'm joined today by Associate Professor of History at Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service in Qatar, Abdullah Al-Arian, who is also co-editor of Jadaliya's Critical Currents in Islam page. How are you doing today, Abdullah?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Abdullah, recently you gave an illuminating talk for the 10 Years On project titled Islamists and the Arab Uprisings. Really quick for the audience, can you tell us in what ways is our understanding of how Islamism interacted with the Arab uprisings limited, and maybe how should those limitations be addressed in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the talk really comes out of some research that I've been doing for a book project that is actually looking at a much broader historical trajectory. So I'm trying to understand the evolution of political Islam in the Arab region over the course of basically the entire 20th century into the 21st century. So part of what I think, is a worthwhile critique of how people who were examining the uprisings at the time were not necessarily taking into consideration the longer historical trajectories of these movements. They were probably examining them much more on a kind of day by day, minute by minute basis, really thinking about how Islamists were sort of entering into the political vacuum created by the downfall of regimes, thinking about how they were taking advantage of certain political openings, particularly those that favored them, in particular things like the move toward electoral democracy within these kind of tenuous transition phases, rather than thinking about the kind of the broader evolution of these movements. And so what I wanted to try to bring to that conversation was thinking about how their priorities have shifted and evolved over time, thinking about how their roots within sort of this kind of social, economic, and kind of the political roots of Islamism as this kind of broad-based social project evolved into what we saw in the uprisings in terms of leveraging some of those kind of social initiatives, the institution building that had been there for some time, but also the integration into existing kind of political, professional institutions, whether we're talking about kind of the piecemeal participation in existing political processes or the establishment of things like charitable associations, medical clinics, schools, those kinds of institutions, and how they manifested in terms of the activism around the uprisings.
That was really succinct, Abdullah. Thank you so much. I'll leave the heavy lifting of the analysis to the talk itself, which of course is going to be linked in the episode's digest. And I highly encourage all of our listeners to go check it out. Thank you once again, Abdullah, for taking the time out of your day to talk to us. We hope to talk to you again soon.
Of course, thank you.
Great. Right one. There we go.
Yeah,
Are we
great
still muted?
insights, Mohammad. No, we are on air.
We're good.
At the beginning of June, the Political Economy Project held the 5th Annual Political Economy Summer Institute, or PESI. For those that don't know, PESI brings together select faculty leaders and students for 4 days of intensive discussions on key texts of critical political economy.
In addition to the faculty-led sessions on topics such as state formation, imperialism, and labor, students presented and received feedback on their current research projects.
Joining us live now are Samer Aboud and Shayna Marshall, two of the faculty leaders at this year's PESI. Thank you both so much for joining us. Shayna, wherever you are, looks beautiful and sunny. Samer, not so much. But we'll start with you, Samer. What stood out to you about this year's PESI?
Thanks, Kat. Thank you, Mohammad, for having us on. I'm actually in my parents' basement, so yes, it's not very luxurious or very pleasant. So this year was unique, obviously, in many respects because it was online. And I will admit some concern about how that went, but I actually thought that it went really well. And it's what really stood out to me in the online format is a lot of the things that make PESI wonderful for me, the kind of learning, the collective inquiry, the feedback, the discussions, that we were really able to replicate that. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it this year that I was worried about.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Samit, for that answer. Shayna, what are some of the key insights or takeaways from this year's institute?
I'm actually calling from a Walmart parking lot, so I just didn't want anyone
You
to
can never
think I
tell.
was in too glamorous a location. I can hear the generators sort of humming in the background, so sorry. Some of the takeaways, in terms of the community that PEP has been able to build and that PESI has built over 5 years is really the commitment of the faculty instructors and just how really well prepared and how dedicated they are to the project. The first year, we were able to sort of blow out the budget and bring a bunch of people from far-flung institutions. But then it sort of narrowed down to the sort of the OG, folks who were interested in the project from the beginning. So that's been really wonderful to meet every year over and over again with these people, and just how committed the students were also. Even in this virtual format, which, as we all know, after doing it for a while, it gets really tedious. But the students were always present, always very responsive, super engaged, and there was lots of follow-up after the event also, which was really heartening. Lots of email back and forth, sharing reading lists, and just lots of ways to keep in touch and continue on with that. Another thing is the sort of the new and emerging topics. Part of the reason why we started PESI was because we felt like there wasn't enough critical political economy instruction in social science departments, including Middle East studies departments. And so we wanted to have a place where people could come, students could come and get a really intensive sort of short-term sort of workshop or institute style training. And we've really been able to achieve that, I think. But even now, there's a lot more sort of leftist and critical analysis going on in the academy in a way that there wasn't maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But hopefully we'll still keep PESI going, even if there's a flourishing of Marxist critique in academia in the U.S.
That sounds really awesome, Shayna. I know I'm feeling like mad FOMO right now. So for those of us feeling FOMO, when can we expect the next round of applications or the next round of PESI to kick off?
Sure. So as in most years, we will usually do a kind of recap together with the faculty that were present. And at that point, we'll produce a new call, and that should come out in September. And we are also hoping to maybe ride this virtual wave, this Zoom wave, and perhaps contemplate some virtual programming between PESIs. So to link people from past PESIs and then new applicants, hopefully, in the virtual world as we anticipate meeting together next year.
Very cool. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today and for telling us all about this year's PESI. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Have a good one.
Goodbye from the
Bye.
Delaware
Bye,
Walmart
guys.
parking lot.
Whew. Well, I'm not even joking about the FOMO. That sounded amazing.
Oh, really?
This year, Karim Rabia gave the PESI keynote talk in conversation with Jadaliya co-editor Shireen Say Ali. Karim discussed his book titled Palestine is Throwing a Party and the Whole World is Invited, Capital and State Building in the West Bank. I spoke with Karim last week regarding the keynote. Here's what he had to say. Hello, everyone. I'm Mohammad Abou-Ghazala here with Karim Rabia, who, as of this fall, will be Assistant Professor of Anthropology and Critical Middle East Studies at University of Illinois at Chicago. He studies privatization, urban development, and the state building project in the West Bank. His first book, Palestine is Throwing a Party and the Whole World is Invited, came out just over a month ago from Duke University Press. Now, Karim, thank you again for taking the time to join us today. You gave the keynote earlier this month at the Political Economy Summer Institute, where you discussed your book with Shireen Say Ali. It was a really informative discussion, and I highly recommend all our listeners check out the talk in full in our digest. But really quick right now, Karim, what can those interested in political economy and Palestine expect to get from your book?
Well, I think that I try to tell a story that is kind of undertold in Palestine and Palestinian studies. I studied, privatization and the state building project in the West Bank. In particular, I talk about, private development, real estate development, and through a couple of cases of privatization and development, I look at, how land tenure is changing, how laws around tenant protection are changing, and how development itself is being reoriented in Palestine. So I think that my hope is that people who are interested in Palestine, who read the book or who listen to this talk, get a kind of a different perspective on what's going on there at the present.
Okay, that's perfect. What do you think the work that you've put into this book, what is all of this discourse and these interventions you make, what does it mean for the current moment for Palestine, do you think, especially like with all that's happened over the past couple of months? A lot of people feel that sort of we're at a new stage or at a new height in the struggle for Palestinian rights. So with all this considered, what do you think? How is this very relevant?
The truth is that's a difficult question, and one that I struggle with, because I'm talking about part of the story that is not about the kind of like most visible forms of dispossession that we're seeing in Palestine. I think that, and to that end, I think that there are much better people to be listening to right now than me on such topics. I think that as with my answer to the previous question, I mean, I think that I'm talking about sort of the economics and the spatial politics around stabilization, right, or political stabilization as well. And I think that what's happening in and around Ramallah that you can see through things like aid and private development is the other side of the story, right? So one of the things that Shireen and I talk about in the discussion is a line that came up in a talk that she gave, sort of a few weeks prior, about the idea that the reason that we're seeing this sort of renewed resistance inside of 48 is precisely because they're not the Oslo territories. And so I think that what's happening in the West Bank, through things that we're all maybe aware of, like the Center of Life policies in Israel that are aimed to sort of slowly displace people from Jerusalem, to the very visible and violent displacement in Jerusalem that we're seeing right now. I think that what's going on in the West Bank is the flip side of it, is an investment in sort of a geographical, economic, political investment in stabilization and in kind of like spreading out the sort of the problems of occupation, let's say. And so I think that I think that they're parts of they're two sides of the same coin, I think.
Wow.
All right. All right again. In June, ASI co-sponsored a webinar featuring the launch of a brand new initiative, the Latin East Working Group. The Latin East Working Group is a collaboration between our partners at Security and Context, the Arab Council for the Social Sciences, the Latin American Council for the Social Sciences, and the North American Congress on Latin America.
In the webinar, scholars from Latin America and the Arab region introduced their work on securitization from comparative regional and interdisciplinary perspectives. The working group will continue to have several public meetings throughout the year, showcasing the development of their research projects.
With us today are Omar Dahi and Amal Akik to tell us more about their panel and what we can expect in the future. They're calling in right now, so it'll be just 1 second.
As we speak. Omar, hello. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
Hi. Hi, Omar. We're still waiting on Amal, but we'll go ahead and... Oh, there she is. Good timing. Hi, Amal.
Ahlan, can you hear me?
Ahlan.
Yeah,
Thanks
can
for
hear
joining.
you.
So,
Ahlan.
Omar, we'll start with you. What prompted the creation of this working group?
Sure. So this working group is really the result of many conversations by many people in different places, but also conversations at the institutional level. So for the past few years, there have been discussions by myself and others at Security in Context, but also in the Latin American Council for the Social Sciences, the Arab Council for the Social Sciences, NACLA, which is the North American Congress on Latin America, as well as in previous actually iterations of this initiative, which we'll talk about in a second, the Latin East. It also included MERIP and also the Arab Studies Institute, which is really a desire to go beyond thinking from sort of one perspective or one region and looking at cross-regional perspectives, cross-regional comparisons on the topic of militarism, policing, violence, examining them basically from different lenses and looking at how the view from the Middle East and the view from Latin America differ, or how they might be similar, what we might learn from the experiences of different countries and different regions, but also to look at the legacies of resistance and mobilization from within the Global South, looking at South-South solidarity and how different movements in these different regions have looked to other regions and other movements as well for inspiration and for solidarity. So this working group emanated basically organically from these conversations, and it brings together about 13 scholars of Latin America or of the Middle East, most of whom are based in those regions, but not all of them. Some are based internationally, like Amal and myself in North America, but who have deep engagements and long-standing sort of time and professional and personal commitments to examining one or both of those regions, to think together on a year-long basis, come together to present their own research, but also to discuss each other's research. And over the next year, they'll be presenting the findings of their research. This first event that we're talking about today was really the launch of the working group. And this first event was hosted by Security in Context, but the different institutions involved, including the ACSS and NACLA, will also be hosting different iterations and basically allowing the researchers to showcase their findings. And finally, by the end of the year, hopefully next year, it will culminate in a special series of panels where the final outcome of the research will be presented in Mexico City in the annual or the big conference of the Latin American Social Science Council.
Thank you, Omar. Amal,
Amal,
where do you hope
where do
that
you
all of
hope
this
that all of
work
this
will
work will
go towards in the
toward?
future? What I mean is that all this stuff, this cutting edge work that you guys are describing, where do you hope that the discourse, what effect do you hope that this work will have on discourse in the near future and the far future?
Well, thank you so much for hosting me and Omar. I think my hope is to get beyond discourse. The idea is to really bring not just scholars of Middle East and Latin America, but from the Middle East and Latin America and North Africa, of course, to think together. And I think that has been just the meetings that we had so far, just to see the kind of epistemological framework that we're working with, the language issues, the translation, and together to really think about, when we think South to South, it's not just a question of encounters, but disencounters, but in creating frameworks to think about what we have in common, but also what we don't have in common, and thinking more globally. And it's been such, for me, a rich experience, but also in terms of disciplinary frameworks, because I'm in literature and comparative literature, and I'm in the social sciences, and then working with colleagues to talk about the relationship between militarism and literature. What connection do we have? And also there's a framework also of cultural studies. And we have colleagues that, for example, from Colombia, who are doing this project also on trying to connect the way they think about literature in the context of Latin America, the way they are thinking from there about literature in the Arab world, and the hunger to really read and to engage with literary studies, but also with political science, about understanding the Arab region and Arab-speaking countries is very profound. At the same time, we know that the availability of text in Spanish and other also indigenous languages is very limited in comparison to English. So in some ways, what is interesting is how I feel like the US is just a link for me. It's not a point of departure. Just like it's because the conversation itself is really kind of South to South, but it just happens that we are based in US institutions, and we have more access, we have more funds, we have to a certain extent more mobility. So we're just using hopefully that to create this kind of link and the bridge between Abayala is more like South America and the Middle East and North Africa.
Thank you, Amal, for that answer, and thank you, Omar. Thank you both for joining us. I know at ASI we're very excited to see the progress that this group makes and the kind of content you guys produce in the future, and we look forward to having you guys to talk about it, hopefully.
Thank you so much.
Shukran. Assalamu.
Have a good day, guys.
We are so very excited now to announce that the spring 2021 issue of the Arab Studies Journal is now available. The issue is the third to be published during the COVID-19 pandemic and the second under the co-editorships of Ziad Abu-Rish and Owen Lawson.
This issue features articles that explore the production and circulation of knowledge from diverse disciplines and approaches, as well as a collection of reviews examining the latest contributions to the interdisciplinary study of the Middle East and North Africa.
And we're happy to have ASJ co-editor Owen Lawson here to tell us more. Hi, Owen.
Hi, Owen.
Hi, great to see you both. How are you?
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to have you. So what can you tell us about this issue of ASJ?
Yeah, we're really excited about it. It was published just last week. Ziad Abu-Rish and I are both co-editors, and we have a really phenomenal team who put a lot of work in during the pandemic in particular. We've had a lot of pressures, and I think we came up with a really great issue in the end of it. So there are three articles that we're excited to feature. The first is by Farida Makar and Ehab Abdo, titled Egyptian Textbooks in Times of Change. And those two authors actually gave an interview to Jadaliya. You could read that as a Newton right now. Then we have by Claudia Esposito an article entitled Reconceptualizing Algeria in Italy, Amara Lahous and Leonardo Sciascia. And that's the first of a series of articles about the Maghreb that are going to be contributing to a special section in the fall 2021 issue, which will be coming out in several months. And that special section is guest edited by Brahim El-Gawabli. And last, we have an article by Ade Al-Mohsen titled Arab Critical Culture and Its Palestinian Discontents After the Second World War. We also have a really phenomenal collection of reviews, and we've featured two of them on Jadaliya. One was published last week, and that was a review of Judith Circus' book, Sex, Law, and Sovereignty in French Algeria, 1830-1930, and that's written by Darcy Fontaine. And this week, we're publishing a review of Lala Jan's book, Spiritual Subjects, Central Asian Pilgrims, and the Ottoman Hajj at the End of Empire, and that review was written by Vladimir Hamid Troyansky. So Arab Studies Journal, we also have an open call for submissions. So if you're listening and you would like to submit your work to the journal, I would encourage you to go to arabstudiesjournal.org and consult our submission guidelines. And we'll look forward to reading your submissions.
Great. Thank you so much, Owen. That issue of ASJ sounds packed with fascinating content, and hoping to spend some of my summer break reading it. So thank you so much.
We'll also link the submissions link in the digest for the audience. So if you're interested at all, which I encourage everyone, if you have anything you want to submit, to go ahead and submit it. Check out the digest. Thank you again, Owen, and congratulations on another incredible issue of ASJ.
And now we're going to take a brief break. Thanks, Owen.
Okay, there we go.
We know you all missed our monthly media segment with Adil Iskander and Malihe Razazan last month, so we're very excited to have Adil back with us today.
Hi, folks. How are you?
Hi, Adil.
Hi.
We're so glad to have you back.
It's good to be back. Thank you both.
Nice shirt.
Well, too much, too busy.
So, Adil, tell us what you and Maliha have been up to. What can we expect in the upcoming issue of Pressing Matter?
Excellent. Well, we've been as busy as the media scene has been. As many of you will recall, it's been a few weeks since the most recent uptick in Israeli attacks against Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah and the continued colonization of East Jerusalem. So that became the topic of our most recent iteration of Pressing Matter. This one we called Covering Palestine in 2021, where we basically take stock of how the media's performance, not just in the United States but globally, has changed vis-a-vis describing the continued dispossession and colonization of Palestinian lives and property. So we thought about the impact of social media, the hashtag Save Sheikh Jarrah, the way in which activists and mobilizers and influencers changed the ballgame in some significant ways this time around. The role that human rights organizations, both inside Israel as well as Palestinian civil society organizations, the role that they've played to change the discussion and shift the debate, but also thinking about mainstream media, this very sort of impenetrable barrier that has been very difficult to break over the past few decades, and the way in which some really important and succinct and articulate interlocutors have been able to change the discourse on Palestine. Some of ASI and Jadaliya's own Noor Arakat and Mouin Rabbani, as well as many others, the Omar Baddars, the Khalid Al-Gindis, the Yusuf Munayrs, and many others, RDM Saises, who have really shifted the discussion, and many of their content has since gone viral and has been trending because of how remarkably insightful but also exceptional it is in comparison to others. We've also thought about how the work that's been done historically around shifting the media narratives on Palestine has become so much more important to think back on. So, for instance, the war on Gaza in 2008 and the films and the documentaries that were produced back then based on reporting on the ground, the existence of new platforms like AJ+, Now This, Vice, TRT, RT, and various other news organizations that are producing shorter clips that are more sort of fast-paced and cut to the chase, if you will. But also thinking about how incredibly savvy Palestinian interlocutors and communities are nowadays in bringing their narratives and stories forward and narrating them in English to some of the mainstream and sometimes even alternative press. And also thinking about how academics and scholars and researchers are now, for once, part of the debate and the discussion around understanding the history of the colonization of Palestine. So all of those things and some are part of a fairly long episode, I would say. It's definitely more than an hour long, but there's enough and a lot to unpack in discussing how Palestine is discussed in the media circa 2021. But that's what we have to offer this time around.
Thank you, Adil. Your analysis is timely and incisive as ever, and we expect no less from you and Malihe. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I'm really excited to check it out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adil. And for our viewers, you will be able to find a link to that episode in the episode's digest, so don't miss it. Thank you,
And
Adil.
a quick break.
And very nice
Thank you,
shirt,
Kat.
Adil. كتير حلوة.
Very great shirt.
Love the shirt.
Here we go. This summer marks the 8th anniversary of the Gezi Uprising, which erupted in Turkey in 2013. To mark this anniversary, Jadaliya's Turkey page put together a roundtable titled Afterlives of Gezi: Repression, Resistance, and Governance in Turkey, where they asked contributors to reflect on the continuing effects of the uprising.
Coincidentally, June 2013 also marks the birth of Jadaliya's Turkey page, which was founded in the midst of the uprising. As the editors note in their introduction, this roundtable should not be understood as a commemoration of Gezi as an event in the past, but rather as an attempt to contribute to the continuation of its spirit into the present and into the future. So we're thrilled to have one of the roundtable's contributors, Avran Altinkas, here to tell us more. Hi, Avran, can you hear us?
Yes, how are you?
Good, how are you doing today?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great, yeah, we're really happy you could be here. So could you tell us, what did you and your colleagues hope to accomplish with this roundtable?
Thank you. My colleagues, Dr. Sümercan Güngan, Dr. Bengi Gümrükçü, and I are all from Turkey, and we all have been active during Gezi protests within Turkey at different levels, of course. So when we were asked to contribute to this roundtable, we all had this thought of what we experienced, but more than that, what the country has experienced and has been experiencing since Gezi. So what we tried to achieve in this roundtable is to show that the authoritarianism in Turkey has been an ongoing issue since the establishment of the republic, and the state apparatus has been used by almost all of the political parties that came to power as a way to consolidate their authority and power over the people, over the opposition, by repressing them. So, and since AKP under Erdogan's rule has been claiming that they are respectful to human rights and democracy in the 2002 elections when they came to power, for us, Gezi has shown that AKP has always been an authoritarian political party after all, just like its predecessors. And as Dr. Güngan clearly puts out, the authoritarian turn, the so-called authoritarian turn in AKP after 2010 was not acknowledged by 2013, and because that's when people have started to realize that AKP has always been authoritarian and already established its political regime under an authoritarian rule. And Gezi has showed this to us and to the people, to all the countries in that sense. And as Dr. Gümrükçü puts very clearly, the government's reaction to Gezi by establishing its top-down counter-protests has been used as a clear way to show that AKP is dividing the society by Gezi protesters and anti-Gezi protesters, which is like AKP supporters and the others. So, in my paper, my contribution was on academic freedom, and I tried to show that let's say, the pressure on academic freedoms in Turkey did not start in 2016. We know that there is this famous Academics for Peace petition, and which ended up with the purge of academic personnel from Turkish universities. But it also it actually started after 2013. After the Gezi protests, approximately 800 academic personnel from private and public universities in Turkey were purged, but of course by other reasons, such as, you will read it in the paper, but such as not obeying the law, not acting in a good way as a civil servant should act, etc. So, and long story short, what we are trying to show in this roundtable is that authoritarianism has always been there in Turkey, and AKP has used the state apparatus to consolidate its power just like its predecessors, and Gezi has been a point that showed how AKP did this. And of course, Asli Bali's and Rim Abu al-Fadl's contributions or answers to our pieces are also very important, and they also show that Gezi can be considered as part of Arab Spring, as an extension of it in Turkey, and also Rabi al-Fadl shows how we can compare Tahrir and Gezi from a similar perspective. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very comprehensive recap of everything. I encourage everyone, of course, to check out the roundtable themselves. There's so many great pieces by so many principled and committed academics. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, Avran.
Thank you for having me. Thanks. Have a great day. Thanks.
You.
Bye.
Now on to pedagogy. This month, the Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative released another installment of the Engaging Book series. Each installment highlights a trending topic in the MENA. Technical difficulty.
Our first technical difficulty.
Yeah, near the end, right near the end.
Pretty good.
Each installment of the Engaging Book series highlights a trending topic in the MENA publishing world. This installment focuses on publications from Stanford University Press on the theme of the Arab Uprisings.
And we will finish the show today with...
Almost flawlessly.
Almost.
Minus that, flawlessly.
Just barely. We'll finish it up with 2 must-reads and a must-watch.
First, Aya Abu Basho wrote a piece titled Salt and Water, an ode to Ghandafar Abu Atwan and Basil al-Araj. The piece, which was published on the 57th day of Ghandafar's freedom strike, highlights the power of Palestinian hunger strikers in Israeli prisons, pulling from Ghandafar's own words and historical lessons on Palestinian resistance to Israeli colonial violence.
The second must-read of the month is The World That Al-Haq Made by Lisa Hajar. The article explains how the Palestinian organization Al-Haq pioneered the use of international humanitarian law as a tool to expose, condemn, and explain the illegalities and illegitimacy of Israeli rule in the occupied territories.
And finally, we have a must-watch this month. Our very own Carly Krakow spoke with Afrah Nasser in a conversation titled Yemen Beyond Breaking News. The two spoke about the Western media's lacking coverage of the dire humanitarian conditions and political situation in Yemen. The two discussed the role of the Saudi and UAE-led coalition, the Houthis, and more, drawing on Nasser's experience as a journalist and her work collecting testimonies from Yemeni civilians devastated by more than 6 years of war. You do not want to miss this conversation, which is published in its entirety on Jadaliyya.
So that's a wrap for this month. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to find all of the content that we mentioned today in this episode's digest, which will be published on Jadaliyya. I'm Kat.
And I'm Mohammad. See you all in September. Thank you so much for listening.